come across a report from The Guardian about a Tory MP who has come out with some comments attacking um, legally settled people in this country. And honestly, it sickens me. It really does. You'd expect it from Reform, but a mainstream party you'd think would have some sort of line of decency. You would think. You know, the Tory party used to be known as the Nasty Party, and Theresa May controversially kind of self-reflected on that. Although it has to be said, as Home Secretary, she didn't exactly make the process easy for people either. But this particular MP, Katie Lamb, who represents the Weald of Kent, again Kent in the news. It was that Reform meeting earlier, and now this. You know, I'm just looking at her here. She looks pretty normal. She doesn't look like a hateful, callous individual, but you can't judge a book by its cover. What she's come out with is disgusting, and I think it's actually fascistic, because we're not talking here about people who are criminals or who haven't played by the rules. We're talking about legally settled people. So her callousness is abhorrent. I'm going to just read out the article here for a bit more details. The report's by Jessica Elgott. Tory MP criticised after demanding legally settled families be deported. Katie Lamb said move would make UK culturally coherent and that a large number of people needed to go home. Need to go home. A Conservative MP tipped as a future party leader has been condemned for saying large numbers of legally settled families must be deported in order to ensure the UK is mostly culturally coherent. The Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has been urged to condemn the comments by Katie Lamb, a Home Office shadow minister and a whip for the party. So this isn't just a backbencher, this woman's actually a whip in a position of some authority. Lamb was previously a special advisor to Boris Johnson, surprise, surprise, and is often described as a rising star of the new intake. Lamb told the Sunday Times she believed large numbers of people with legal status in the UK would need to have the right to stay revoked and should go home. She said there are also a large number of people in this country who came here legally but in effect shouldn't have been able to do so. It's not the fault of the individuals who came here, they just shouldn't have been able to do so. They will also need to go home. What that will leave is a mostly but not entirely culturally coherent group of people. In a letter to Badenoch, the Lib Dem leader Ed Davey called it deeply concerning and unpatriotic. People who have come to the United Kingdom legally, played by the rules and made it their home do not need to go home. This is their home. Davey said that Lamb's suggestion of removing thousands of people who were in the UK legally shows just how far your party has moved away from the fundamental values of decency, tolerance and respect for the rule of law that the vast majority of people in our country hold dear. The Liberal Democrats said the Conservatives should urgently clarify if Lamb reflected the party's position and whom the party believes shouldn't have been able to come to the UK legally. What does a mostly but not entirely culturally coherent group of people mean, and how would this be set out in the Conservative Party's immigration rules? The letter asks. The position is similar to Reform UK, which has said it would scrap indefinite leave to remain and that migrants would need to reapply for 5-year visas, which would only be granted to those with high earnings. Labour also intends to reform ILR, though it will only make it available to those who have been in the UK for 10 years and who can prove they have made a contribution to UK society, such as through voluntary work. That's the article. So this thing that Reform wants to come out with about reapplying for 5-year visas, which would only be granted to those of high earnings. I have a big problem, the Tories just advocate this as well, about putting the focus on high earnings. Why? Because you could have a Russian oligarch who's a millionaire or even a billionaire. And as we know, that doesn't necessarily mean a positive contribution to society. You could have a Chinese agent who is earning a large amount of money, and as we know, that may not be a positive contribution to society. I really think the focus when it comes to immigration should be, does the person have affection for this country? Can they speak a decent level of English and are they contributing to society? For me, those things should be sufficient. But this idea of punishing people who are legally here, firstly, I would challenge Lamb, would she compensate these people? Because they've paid money to come here, they've paid money for visas, the entire process they've been through, would she compensate them? I think it's totally disgusting to punish people, to put them through that sort of emotional turmoil. You know, they may, in all likelihood, they would have established friends, colleagues, an affection for the city or town or county that they're in. It's sickening, actually, and I think it's actually fascistic. And I'll be quite honest, I told her so. You know, I never threaten anyone that's crossing a line, but I do think that when politicians come out with extreme statements, they should be challenged and condemned. And I'm not the only one that visited her social media page to do so, because these people think they can just act with impunity. They could just come out with this damaging sort of rhetoric and get away with it. You know, Kimmy Badenoch often challenges the Prime Minister on his guts, quite frankly. Well, let's see if she has guts. Let's see if Kimmy Badenoch has guts and takes action against the extremists in her party. Katie Lamb is an extremist. You know, forget all that Middle England kind of Women's Institute type image. I'm using stereotypes here. She looks totally harmless, and yet she is coming out with something that the far right would be proud of. This is the sort of thing the BNP would have come out with not long ago when they were a functioning party. She's careful not to give any racial component to it, but by definition it's going to mean throwing out people who are from other parts of the world, and that is racist, to punish people when they haven't done anything wrong. They've played by the rules. You know, they've literally paid money for the visa process, for that process, and that is not an easy process. And I just think it's sickening that she wants to give them anxiety, she wants to punish them, and she's telling them to go home. To hell with you, Katie Lamb. To hell with you. I'm really disgusted by her, and I hope Badenoch has the guts to take some action here and make it clear this is not official Conservative Party policy, because if it is, then they're just trying to out-reform reform, and unfortunately that will indicate a move to the hard right, borderline far right, quite frankly. I mean, there's just no moral justification to punish people who have played by the rules. So let's see what happens. Is this just one MP running her mouth? Or is this actually mainstream Conservative Party policy? I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Robert Jenrick's sympathetic to it, given his callous record of wanting to cover up the cartoon images to make migrant children feel welcome. There's a real nasty streak to the Conservative Party. And rather than getting better under Kimmy Badenoch's watch, it's almost like they're trying to be as even more right-wing. But, you know, I'm open-minded enough to recognise that this is not every Conservative MP. I'm sure some of her colleagues will be horrified by those comments. And they need to speak up. Otherwise, they're just going to be seen once again as the nasty party. It's just disgusting to want to punish people who played by the rules. I mean, think of the anxiety that will cause. Has she learned nothing from the Windrush scandal? And to think that this cold-blooded individual is being tipped as a future leader. It reminds me of another Tory MP, Laura Trotter, who came out with some very ignorant comments about disabled claimants, effectively saying that it was easy for them to work. You know, the Tories really have a survival of the fittest mindset. It's kind of a attitude that those who could defend themselves, you know, we're going to support them. What I mean by that is she has no empathy for the difficulties of uprooting your life and going to another country, starting a new life, going through everything that involves. Now, I'm not loony left when it comes to immigration. There should be controls. People should be contributing to society, and I would put a big prefix on having affection for this country. You know, reform's talking about income. What if you have someone who harbours resentment towards the UK, but they just happen to be wealthy? It's a pretty stupid barometer of seeing if someone can integrate or not. whether they're wealthy or not. Obviously, someone who has no money, and legally they wouldn't be able to sign on. It's going to be difficult to see how they could contribute. But then there is an argument: if you actually allow people to contribute, if you allow people to apply for work, then they can. But overall, frankly, when it comes to the subject of immigration, there's just too much damn negativity in this country. I'm not naive. There's people who absolutely shouldn't be here. There was a Sudanese migrant who stabbed a woman to death recently, and he was accused of smirking when he done it. People like that, not only should they be deported, they should be robustly punished for those sort of evil criminal acts. There are people who should not be in this country, no question about it. But when someone like this runs their mouth and talks about cultural coherence, there's immigrants who are contributing to our country who are frankly a hell of a lot better than some of our natural citizens. I would argue that a Filipino nurse or an Indian doctor is giving more to society than some mindless hooligan throwing bricks at the police. So whose side is she on? Shame on you, Katie Lamb. You're absolutely abhorrent. You're a disgrace. Why don't you just join the form and be done with it? Because as much as I dislike the Conservative Party, I'd even be open-minded enough to say this doesn't seem like mainstream Conservative policy. At least I don't think it is. Let's see if Kimmy Badenoch puts the record straight. If she can't respond to this, if she can't bring herself to say anything, or if she makes some vapid response to it, then it will show she's a weak leader. Badenoch has to have the courage to speak up and say, no, this does not represent our party, and she's only speaking for herself. She should get some sort of reprimand for bringing the Conservative Party into disrepute with this. I'm honestly disgusted by it.